Don't forget to subscribe to Basement Tales. Just go on Apple, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts and hit that subscribe button. We release a podcast every Thursday. That way you'll be sure not to miss an episode. Welcome to Basement Tales with Sam Jackman, Charlie Einsman, Ed Grass, and Sandra Delancey. We have fun telling crazy but true stories about turning the worst possible property disasters into bags of money. Along the way, we'll pass along some important lessons to help you make cash on real estate. Sam and Charlie walked away from cubicle hell 25 years ago. Starting with no property, they created their own Clear Sky group of companies, sold hundreds of houses, bought dozens of rentals, and made millions in hard money loans. I'm Ed, a big firm litigator until muscular dystrophy made me find a hobby other than suing people. I miss it. Sandra's the normal person here with a real job plus some rentals. Her decades of friendship with the group, from office flunkies to property gurus, might help keep us all humble and focused on learning something. I wouldn't count on it. So back to this Capitol Hill thing.
Should we talk about the Capitol Hill deal and then talk about, and then Charlie's shaking his head, don't talk about the Capitol Hill.
We could do it next time, unless you want to do it now.
I don't know anything about the Capitol Hill deal.
Do we want to do that?
Charlie wanted to do the...
do we want to do that story today?
He wanted to do the deal?
No, I meant more as a business thing. No, we can go into that Belle Isle story.
The Belle Isle story.
I mean, because right now I think the Capitol Hill deal is full of lies.
Oh, wow.
Well, that's always a good story.
Let me just ask you.
We have the hazmat spills. We have the hazmat.
Let me ask you a question. If you have a $2.6 million first trust on a property, would you even consider subordinating your position to anybody? And you
not on a
aren't
property
paid,
worth $2.5 million.
and you aren't paid in 3 years.
Wait, so what does that mean? What does that mean? What kind of deal is this? You guys already know what it is, but you need to bring us up to speed.
Well, here we go. This is the deal.
This is it. We were going to do Belle Isle, but we're
not doing Belle Isle.
Sorry.
We got to jump into Maryland. Uh-oh. Am I allowed to say the street name even?
Yeah.
Say the street name. We could. Well, it depends on how much we disparage people.
Okay, we'll just stick with a street name.
Not even. Yes. What is it? Maryland Avenue.
It is.
Yes. Okay. So here's what happened. So we were approached in 2017 to do a hard money loan on a 3-unit condo conversion on Capitol Hill. The property was, what do you think, 2 or 3 blocks away from the Supreme Court?
Yeah, you can see the guard for the Supreme Court, assuming they still have a guard. They have you can see him from the front of the house.
Well, probably now you can see National Guard.
That's the Capitol building for the folks that don't live here in DC.
Yeah.
Right. And so
it's a gorgeous spot. Yeah.
Right.
It's beautiful.
So at the time, here were the numbers. It was a refinance. It was a refinance event for $1.65 million. To get 3 units was going to cost $1 million to do the renovation work. So you're in there at $2.65 million, and then the out price was about $5 million. Okay, and he wanted a $2.5 million first trust. So those are the numbers. And so we were going to come in as first trust, but the problem.
Can I ask about the deal though? So I mean, $5 million, and you said 3 units, right?
It was 1 unit when we saw it. They wanted to make it into 3 units.
So it's reasonable to think that you can get like $1.5 million plus for a 1 unit, whatever this is. You didn't say
on this street, super improved luxury condo could go like that. It's beautiful location, like the best in town almost. So well, not really the best, but in the best class in town.
It's in the best.
If you work on Capitol Hill and you've got money, you're a lobbyist or whatever. It's a perfect spot.
It's dynamite. You don't have to worry about commuting.
How many bedrooms in each of the units? Like 3?
It was a large home. It could have had 3 bedrooms in each unit.
So it was a total of 3 units. 2 of them were 2-level, 2 over 2. So it's like a duplex over a duplex, and the other one was a 3rd unit above a garage space, right? So the unit above the garage space had to be approved by DCRA plus this thing called BZA, which is the zoning administration. And we didn't think that he would get approved for that third unit. And so we decided not to do that loan.
And what was they wanted what, 1.5 from us?
At the time, no, they wanted 2.5.
2.5 million from us. Okay, right. And that would fund buying the place, fixing the place, and then they want to sell all of them for 5 million total.
Right. No, it just absolutely, it wasn't buying the place. It was refinancing out an existing hard money lender. So it was a cascading. It's what we call a cascading hard money lender, using one hard money lender to refinance out a previous hard money lender who, oh, by the way, the first hard money lender never got one iota of a payment. So it's all the payments built up over time. So this guy never made any payments.
Right.
And so once we found that out, once we found out we didn't think he would get pre-approved for the third unit, we turned the deal down. We said, no, we can't do this deal. So now fast forward it ahead, 3 years? Now the deal is back and he wants us to give him about $1 million, but the existing hard money loan that's on it, they're agreeing, or they might agree, to subordinate us so that our $1 million becomes in first lien priority.
And that would be great. That would be the best deal we've ever done.
But then in theory, we would be the first million, then the hard money lender would be the second 2.5 million. So that's now 3.5 million. So to make any money, this guy's going to need to sell these for like the 5 million, but still
he's got a model says he's sell it for 6 million. Now, if he's doing different style of development, which I'm not familiar with and I'm not convinced of, but at $1 million on an asset that I know will sell all day long for $2.5–3 million fixed up, I'm in right away. No,
because you could just
because I'm not even worried about his 6 million. He can make 6 million. I'm really happy for him, but I don't even have to think, because I know if we give him $1 million, we're certainly getting our $1 million back. Because even if we took it back and just renovated it as a house and put $500,000 in it, we'd sell that thing for $2.5 million all day.
That doesn't sound too good to be true.
As a single family.
That sounds too good to be true. Why wouldn't you do that?
Well, because Charlie said the first trust holder, who's the hard money lender now, has to agree to these terms, and because the whole deal is being carried by the bankruptcy court, all parties have to be in agreement that it's fair, it's equitable, and I can't imagine being a first trust holder and agreeing to that. But if the first trust holder believes the $6 million deal will work, adding us as $1 million doesn't really present him any risk if he believes in that. But I don't even want to try to figure that out, because that's beyond my thinking.
Yeah, but here's why they might do it, I would think, because let's say the thing just collapses now and goes to bankruptcy. It still needs, in their minds, it needs $1 million of renovation still. So how are they going to sell it and get their $2.5 million back as is?
You could do a $500,000 renovation and sell it for $2.5 million.
Yeah, well, the other thing that's unclear though is I think that the $1 million in construction might be part of the existing loan in place, and that money hasn't been spent yet.
Oh, how interesting. That may be true too.
You mean like it's a construction draw that they won't have to pay out?
The $1 million is part of the, whatever it is, 2 million, 2.
So Sandra, if they borrowed $2 million from this other people, and the people only advanced them $1 million to get things purchased, but didn't advance them any money on the construction because he never had the plans finalized, then they still have they really only have $1 million outstanding with him, and they'll let us come in underneath them to fund the construction.
And this other lender is not going to lend them any more money. So they're not sinking any more into this. They're going to say, okay, if you can get someone else to come in.
But the numbers
give you.
Yeah, but the numbers are a lot higher, because back in December 2017, the existing debt on it was 1.65 million. And this was about 3 years ago. So you figure 1.65 million, no payments were made to the hard money lender in 3 years. Do the math. So I think the existing debt is at least $2 million. And so the whole idea to subordinate our first at $1 million was they were going to use the $1 million to pay back that existing lender some portions of that $1 million. Let's say, like, I don't know, 500 grand or whatever the outstanding arrearages and payments are. and then they would just become a second trust because they would subordinate us as the first, and then we would become the first.
That could make sense. I mean, but the biggest thing that's missing to me is what's happened in 3 years. I mean, we know firsthand, Sam, it takes a while in DC for a lot of stuff, but 3 years is a long time unless there's an insurmountable problem. Like the BZA says, take a hike.
Well, the only thing that I know that happened in 3 years is that he fired his architect.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that I know has actually happened.
Yeah. Well, his statements are that the architect took him down a path that didn't maximize the use of the site and that couldn't be finally approved. And so he had to finally discharge his architect.
Now, can a regular investor, I guess, even consider that they'd get a deal like this where they could not pay their hard money lender back for 3 years and not have that property taken away from them? Why didn't that get taken away? 2 years.
That's a good question.
A year ago.
I know for sure why it didn't get taken back, because the hard money lender doesn't want to have to execute on that project themselves.
Right.
Because not only are they out the money that they lend, but they got to spend another $1 million in construction on something that's not even approved yet.
Well, not only spend $1 million on construction, but they have to figure out how to get everything approved, and they have to hire a contractor, and they have to so substantially discount it to flip it wholesale. They're not going to get their money back.
I'm thinking wholesaling it so substantially, though. I mean, $1 million, is that what they're in right now?
No, they're in it for two. They're in it for two because
it's hard to say with the draw, right? How much are they in? But if it's almost like the more they're in, the more stuck they are, right? Because if they were only in for $1 million, then they could why not just foreclose? They could easily get their money back. But if in for $2.5 million, the only way they'll get that back is if the whole thing gets built and sold, which, like Charlie said, they don't want to do.
Right. I mean, just by my estimation, I'm thinking, the loan was 1.6 million back in whenever 2017, 2018. You figure probably and he's with a hard money lender. I've seen the term sheet, so approximately 12% interest. So their payments alone on $1.6 million is $16,000 a month. So if you multiply 16,000 times 3 years, that's $576,000 of interest-only payments only.
That's without any late fees.
Late fees.
In our environment, we'd escalate you up to a much higher rate if you had
late fees, default. Years. That's why I'm thinking that first trust position's up to $2 million.
All day.
Wow.
Well, we'd like to jump in.
And they're not going to feel they break even unless they get all their principal back and 12% interest, I would think.
You would think.
Otherwise, they're going to feel like they've lost money, and but if
they believe he's going to make $6 million on the out sale, they're probably looking at us. We could be a white knight there.
Right. So the new plan, which your bet is as good as mine. The new plan is showing instead of 3 units, the third unit being behind the property on top of a garage, and then two 2-over-2s, right? 2 duplexes and a unit of the garage. The new plan is calling for no unit over the garage, plus 8 units in the 1 4-level row home. And so that's what the new plans are showing. And so out of 8 units, then he'll probably get a $6 or $7 million out. But again, Again, BZA.
It's the approval.
DCRA, right? It's approval. Again, a new architect, which
if it's allowable, DCRA will approve it. The bigger problem is the BZA. That's not the BZA, the ANC. We haven't even talked about the ANC. Right. Doesn't the ANC have to approve? So for our listeners,
you're gonna have to talk about the ANC.
Yeah, not to get, and actually, actually, have you dealt with them at all, or Sandra down in your neck of the woods? Do you want to explain what the ANC process is like, or especially from a perspective of somebody who has to deal with that stuff?
I'm trying to think of the acronym. I know it's like the neighborhood committee. What is it? Like area neighborhood committee or something like that?
I think that's it. Area neighborhood committee. Yeah.
And they are kind of
it's advisory neighborhood commission.
Oh, advisory.
Advisory. So they advise on pretty much anything, not just real estate, but anything that happens in your neighborhood. This committee kind of gets together and approves, disapproves, lobbies for that. But In my neighborhood, no, I've never had to build anything over here in my neighborhood. So, no, I've never had an issue with that. But I would imagine that the ANC wouldn't have an issue, especially in that area. I mean, that's a
Well,
really nice area. It seems upscale, right?
Well, that's the problem, actually. So, and Sam can tell you stories about an ANC that he had to deal with. So there, like you said, it's the area, or it's advisory for a specific area. DC's divided into so many ANCs, but they're like a quasi-public, quasi-private group. It literally is like a neighborhood group, but under the law, they get very significant powers, like you said, as to how the neighborhood's going to be used, right? So, like if a big grocery store wants to come in, and the neighborhood doesn't want that, or is thrilled by that, or they don't want the parking, they have a lot of power about whether something gets approved or not, to then go through DCRA and then the BZA is the Board of Zoning Appeals to get all of that stuff zoned. So this is a classic possible NIMBY situation, not in my backyard. You have these beautiful townhouses and row homes from the 1800s that are just gorgeous, and there, a lot of them probably are still single family homes. They've kept up over the years. So now imagine you've got, $3 million homes, and he wants to stick 8 single family condos in, even though they'll be, from everybody's perspective, pretty high end.
Yeah.
People don't want the traffic. Well, that means 8 more cars, or people crowding the local whatever. So the ANC could get very upset about that sort of thing. Gee, we want this to be a neighborhood of single family $2 and $3 million homes, not apartment dwellers or whatever terrible, because gee, somebody could buy it and then rent it out. And so that could be maybe the biggest problem, assuming that the regular zoning is passed. You still, if it's not absolutely by right, the ANC could issue BZA, whatever. So if he doesn't have the permits yet, that to me is a huge potential issue.
This particular row home was built in 1890. And so we already know it does have historical issues, especially with the front facade, that I believe he's got to keep in place. So he's got some historical issues on top of that as well.
That's right.
And so we'll just stay tuned on this guy. But even though from our point of view, like Sam said earlier, if we just throw $1 million loan out there and we're subordinated to first trust position, I mean, the tax assessment on this thing is $2 million. So even if you keep it as a row home, it's going to sell for $2.5 million. So we're in there safe all day.
Well, maybe this is a great opportunity to do a summary of what that all means to investors and to lenders.
Number one, if you're doing any kind of development project, especially even as a lender, let's approach it from the lender standpoint. You've got to be very careful that your end user knows what they're doing. I mean, you could have somebody who knows what they're doing, but if they don't have the right architect or the right anything, then even though they supposedly know what they're doing, they're going to get mud in their face. So as a lender, you really have got to make sure that your end user knows what the heck they're doing, or else your money is going to be out there for naught. One of the things that we do is, especially on development projects, a lot of times we will not lend unless it's shovel ready. It's got to be shovel ready because we just don't want to deal with all that headache.
Or I guess what you could do, like in this scenario, you could lend them the $1 million to buy the place, figuring it's still worth $2 million as is, but then he can mess around for a year and try to get all those approvals. And then maybe at that point, you lend him another $1 million or whatever it is, because now he's got the shovel ready thing. But I was thinking, like, from Sandra's perspective, like if she's looking at to buy another rental unit, even, you have to know what you can do with the property. I think we talked about one point about egress windows. Like, buyers can't just look at it and say, oh, I could slap a new door in there, or I could just add a window. Like Sam mentioned, there's historic issues in more places than you realize. You can't just slap an extra window into a property like this, even if that's all you want to do to create, say, an extra bedroom. it still could be completely impossible because of regulatory issues. So you can't price that in your expectation until you've got the permits, I think. But up to that point, it's just a pipe dream.
Yeah.
And for a buyer, another interesting observation is you might go to buy a condo and you'll be like, why is the square footage so expensive? Like what? I mean, these finishes are the same as any single family house, but all of these soft costs with development are so expensive for your contractor. So if you're buying something newer where the costs were recently incurred, then those prices can be so much higher and seem unreasonable because, well, you don't see any of the actual work that was done. And it was just some paperwork really of getting everything approved. But that paperwork took a lot of carrying costs and a lot of professional study to make sure the homes are safe and built to a community standard, a contemporary community standard.
So
Yeah.
I'm hearing two things then. So as a new buyer or I'm looking to purchase an investment property, I've seen properties that say they come with the plans already for expansion, right? Those seem like they should be something that, I'm more, looking for purchasing as opposed to something where I think that I could expand it, but I'm not sure. And I have to go through all of the, the legal, regulatory commissions and, anything else to, get the building permits, to get the, the house rezoned or the home rezoned for whatever purpose that I'm looking to rezone it for. So the first one is ideal. I already have the plans and I'm selling the property with these plans. And then the second thing is, how do I know that I can do what I want to do with that property? Is there any way to know that ahead of time?
Well, there is, but let's get back to what you just said, though. You can fall into the pitfall that says, oh, I'm going to buy it with plans ready for expansion. Well, you've got to be savvy enough to then ask the next question. Are those plans shovel ready? Because there are a lot. Yeah, are they stamped? Or is it ready to be shovel ready? Because a lot of guys will say, oh, yeah, well, I've got the plans ready for expansion and the plans are done. But you could be buying plans that are ready for inspection, but you cannot put a shovel in the ground. You still have got to go through other approval processes. And we've seen people get burned on that along the way because they're buying plans, but they're not buying permit ready plans.
So I could just be buying architectural plans and not plans that have been approved by the.
Right. It's sort of like you're buying the dream, and if you're allowed to build it, the plans probably are great. They might even work, but if the plans say require you to rip off half the facade and they haven't gotten them approved, you take them into DC or wherever and they say, these are lovely plans. There's not a problem with them, except you can't change the facade. So here's your plans back. Go deal with that. And you're like, oh boy, what do I do? But that's why I use the term stamped. I mean, they're stamped by the architect, they're stamped by the engineer, and then they're stamped by the regulatory authority. That and Charlie's terminology is the simplest thing, which is shovel ready. That literally you can take that, you buy the place, you buy the plans, and the next day your worker can show up and start digging, and you're not going to get shut down by the city in the process. And that's where again, for our listeners, that's a place where people can add value, because if you know that process and know nothing else, you are very valuable, because you might be able to buy a property. If you're a contractor construction and you know the regulations, you might see this property and think, oh my goodness, I will have no problem turning this into a 3-apartment unit, and right now it's just a single family. So you can release the value that way, because even everybody on this podcast, we wouldn't touch it, because we don't have that much experience about contracting without permitting of some of the weirder things without talking to somebody. Like Sam and Charlie said, if it's just to turn this thing into a nice upgraded single family, that's no problem. We definitely can get the permits to do that, or have somebody. But when you want to, in the time where this happens a lot, is you want to change an exterior and you want to turn something into it from a single family to a multifamily, like those are the things that trigger a lot of these regulatory problems.
So Ed, what are you saying? So I'm trying to purchase a property. I need to move on it quickly. There's a person or there's someone that I could go to kind of look at that and tell me, knowing the area, knowing what I'm trying to do, they could tell me whether or not my plans could be realized.
Well, and that's the thing, though. I've said to Sam and Charlie, I think that's one thing that would be great for these guys to have is somebody who's a nerd about DC regulations. Now they know enough people, like they have architects, Sam and Charlie, that they've worked with in DC, and they can go say, there's certain things that are by right. Right. So some of them can say, oh, by right at that spot, you can expand out the back, or by right, you can switch it into a multifamily home, and that might be sufficient. But back to your point, for a regular human being, that's the sort of thing you might need a partner who has that experience. I mean, maybe the hard money lender knows enough to decide that. So you've got this deal. You think, gee, I see a place right next door. They converted it from one house into 3 apartments. This is another property that's available for, say, 3 doors down. This looks great. I want to buy this. But if you're not sure about that permitting, it sure sounds like you could probably do it if they did it 3 doors down, but not necessarily. Maybe you have a sophisticated enough hard money lender that can tell you, or a contractor down there. I don't know. What do you think, Sam and Charlie? How would you deal with that to try to figure that out as a newer buyer? Because even, as I say, for you guys at the complex land development, you need almost a land developer.
Yeah, I don't think a new buyer should be involved in changed use.
Really?
Right.
Yep. I just wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
It's way too rough a process.
It's sort of it's not sort of, it is speculative, I guess, unless you already own the property. If you own the property, you could try to go through the process because you don't have all sorts of extra carrying costs, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole idea, right? The carrying costs. Like, let's just get back to our example and we'll just make it easy. Let's say you bought it for $1 million. You need $1 million in renovation or construction costs, and your out prices will be simple, $3 million. Well, if it takes you a year to get your $1 million that you're going to owe because you bought it from a hard money lender, even at 10%, you're paying $100,000 in the first year just on holding costs. And that's if you can get it approved within the first year. So that you've got to understand that math is too. So that's not the kind of math I would use if I was a beginning investor. I would just take the single family, the townhouse, renovate it, buy it at a good price, renovate and flip it until you've gotten, 10, 20 projects under your belt. And if that's something you want to venture into, then you just had better make sure that profit margin is huge. Make sure it's pretty big. Well,
particularly the more complex the regulatory jurisdiction. But how about this concept, though? Say Sandra finds a place and it's a decent deal at, say, $250,000. She can turn around and it'll be a decent rental. Maybe it doesn't hit the 1% rule. Sandra's not going to get $2,500 a month, but she has reason to believe it can be subdivided and will double the price, let's say. I mean, would it be worth taking a little bit of a flyer then? You figure if it fails to get the better use, maybe you don't make a whole lot of money on the more basic use. Have you guys ever done that? Sort of try to, I mean, it's a little bit like what you're talking here with the Capitol Hill one. You're not really taking at $1 million, it's a good enough deal, whether it turns back into a single family house or 6 condos.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, we've had a bunch of scenarios in Northeast and Southeast DC where the folks have gotten really good deals on single family houses, and they've come with an extra lot. So they didn't realize it at the time, but they bought a single family house, and oh, by the way, it has an extra lot. So they kept the house, they subdivided the lot out, and then they have sold the lot along with selling the house. So whether you rent the house or whatever, but they had an extra lot and they sold the house.
We even had bought one ourselves. And the neighbor wanted to buy a piece of a very long lot, just the back edge of it, for his own driveway. And they paid us quite a lot of money, about $75,000 for that.
For a sliver.
Out of the blue.
A sliver for $75,000.
That's something that you can look for in DC, because I know they have a lot of double lots in DC.
Yeah, that's
right. I live in one right now.
My lot is a double lot.
Yeah.
I could have probably done something with that, but maybe for a new investor, that's something that you can keep your eye out for,
Yeah.
those double lots,
Yep.
Particularly if you live in the area and like you start to learn that stuff. Like Sandra, you've because of where you live and you see the way DC works, you at least have a sense of where you might be able to carve a lot out of something.
Accessory units in DC too. That's a
Big thing.
Yeah.
Big
You
thing.
can put an accessory unit in your backyard as long as you are living in the, the primary residence. You can rent that accessory dwelling unit ADUs out to, someone.
That's right. And another popular play in Washington, D.C. is that these guys are buying N unit row homes. And so some of these N unit row homes have an adjoining lot, and it's big enough to put another row home on it. But what they've been doing is they've been buying the N unit row home, which, oh, by the way, by right is 2 condo units. They're buying it with that extra lot that comes with it. And so now they're putting up 4 condo units on that piece of property. And so instead of getting 1 N unit row home, they're going to get 4 2/2 condos using the extra lot. And so that's another good play that I see people doing as well down there.
How long can someone expect to, I guess, take to go through this process of having a property rezoned or something? So,
I mean, I think a year would be your
I hear
minimum.
you throwing out the year. It sounds like a year doesn't really fade you guys when you're talking about doing.
Well, round trip is 2 years, my guess. 18 months to 24 round trip.
It depends on how much you're doing. Even quote unquote by right can slow you down. I just started laughing because of what Sam's gone through. I mean, no, you have issues with an existing neighbor. DC, I don't think there was this issue about solar cells. So that if you may have a right to pop the top and add space on your property, but if that casts shade on somebody else's existing solar cells in DC, you have to get all sorts of okays and regulatory stuff. So I'm just laughing about that year, right? I mean, it could be less than that.
A lot of stuff can come up.
Right.
Stuff you can't imagine.
And you may have to pay people, and I don't mean bribe officials. I mean pay neighbors to say, hey, I'm gonna shade your solar cells, and you have a right to block me, but please don't block me, and I'll give you some money not to block me from doing that. But of course, back to Sam's or Charlie's earlier comment, people see the outprice on these things and saying, wow, all those places are going to sell for $3 million. And, I'm the next door neighbor. They can give me $50,000 just to agree to such and so. But there's not that much profit in these things to do that. So I've seen enough of DC, and I don't have a ton of experience to think it's a year is definitely a good, like, just assume a year. And hopefully if you're really good, it'll be shorter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was hoping to hit Belle Isle, but I'm not sure that we have time today.
No, but I thought this was very good. I mean, there's just, like I said, we learned a lot of terms, right? Number one, subordination. What does it mean to subordinate from one loan to the next? We talked about financing condo conversions. We talked about
historic
issues. We talked about why you maybe want to avoid any kind of multi-unit developments unless you understand, what you're doing. We talked a little bit about architects. That's one of the main important things that you need on your team if you're going to do this is a very good architect. Like Ed was bringing up earlier, you need a good land development person who knows what you could do on a certain property. I mean, there's just so many different things that you need to be part of your team.
Maybe having to deal with your ANC as well, those local committees that can.
Yeah, that's very serious. You got to take that seriously. I mean, you think, oh, I'll just breeze through. It's not like that. Not a chance. I mean, the people are dug in. The whole structure of the ANC, there are a lot of people who really enjoy that, and they want to be a big part of your decision making.
Years ago, we tried to get into another business. That's, I think, when I first met Ed. You guys met me for lunch. You were trying to get into some business here in DC, and you were wondering about the ANCs because the ANCs had to approve these special businesses that were coming to DC. Had to do with legalization of some illegal substances back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
But the ANC, had to approve any of
That's
the
right.
businesses coming into their neighborhoods, and they were very strong about, their opinions.
Right, where they're going to go. Yeah, and the thing is, like most things, it's a great idea, the ANC, because hey, we live here. We know, do we need a pharmacy? Do we need a 7-Eleven? Do we need more housing? Do we need, single family, multi? So you really do want that input. And Sam, I think, did very well working with the ANC on the project I know about. You tell them this is what we're going to do to keep the project clean. This is what it's going to look like, a beautiful new X, Y, or Z. It's going to be this type of, and some people try to bull through this. And some, of course, some ANCs are just unreasonable. They don't want anything. They don't care what you're doing. So it's quite an interesting process to do correctly. Unfortunately, I guess when people are involved, it's always going to be a bit of a mess, as we prove here every week on Basement Tales.
All righty. So our next one is Belle Isle. There we go.
Next one is Belle Isle. And if you guys have any questions or comments or feedback, please send us an email at yourstory@basementtales.com. That's with 2 T's. Again, yourstory@basementtales.com. We'd like to hear from our listeners, and maybe ask us questions if there's anything you want us to talk about. Maybe share an experience with us. We would be glad to hear from you.
And don't forget to hit subscribe so you get our podcast every Thursday
at 1 o'clock.
I don't know what you say, Sam. You give us the energy subscribe.
Subscribe to us on Apple. No, I don't fucking know. I have to
See,
have a little
it's
script
not
to
that
read.
easy.